Ari, thanks for coming on the show today, man.
Hey, man. How are you?
LA native.
Yes, sir.
I have got a few of those. We joked about this, that they're kind of going, extinct.
Yeah, it feels like when you see one in the wild, it's like, hey how are you?
Wait, local? Whoa, where did you come from? So Malibu High.
Yep.
You've done some amazing stuff with your podcast. Obviously brought you on as a Jedi of sorts to help me produce mine.
Sure thing.
And let's tell the people what they want to hear in the podcast stuff.
So I sort of got into the podcast game on accident. Mm-hmm. My buddy and I, my friend Matt, we were just kind of like, we should do a podcast. No real reason behind it, no instinct beyond. It was something we wanted to get into. And we were kind of just talking, and one day one of us just came up with the name Millennials Don't Suck. That's stupid. in reaction to some YouTube video or something. And we were like, wait, that's a pretty cool name for something. We decided it would be a podcast, and started interviewing people, very similar to what you're doing now, just sort of like had a network to tap into. And it was like, oh, cool. I would want to listen to interviews with these people that I know, so we should just do that.
And did you come from being a fan or subscriber to many podcasts?
Not many, I would say, but a couple of my favorites. I don't know if you know Bill Simmons, who's like a sports writer.
Sure.
I've been a fan of his since I was a little kid.
Okay.
And so he was one of the first big podcasters. Like in 06, 07, his podcast started to get a lot of traction when I was, 17. And I started listening then. I was like, this is really cool. It's like radio, but I can listen to it whenever I want. And even then, I felt like this is going to be something.
You see, I feel like I've come to the podcast party very late.
Yeah.
I'm going to be 30 on Friday.
Happy B-Day.
Thank you. And I've listened to very specific podcasts or audiobooks. Well, they're different, but podcasts that might promote an audiobook that I like or have to do with some health, nutrition, diet thing that only is available in a podcast.
Right.
So I don't just like tune in and listen like the casual listener, but now I become this major podcast fanboy.
Well, it's interesting because like once you discover certain niches within the world, it's like, oh, there's 10 podcasts like in this little like sort of super niche.
Totally.
And once you become sort of accustomed to them, then it almost becomes you feel like you're becoming part of the conversation in a way that I think with like terrestrial radio or other forms of content, it doesn't feel as natural.
It's natural. And I don't know if you ever envision yourself as a creator.
No, certainly not.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
And my background was in the restaurant hospitality business.
Right.
So all I did was work with people in the entertainment industry, and I hated it.
Right.
So the last thing I wanted to do was be on the talent side until a few years ago when everybody's jumping on this personal brand bandwagon, and the proof is in the pudding. The data speaks for itself, how you can leverage these things, activities, and create business funnels, etc. Now, with reality TV, I've done that 2 or 3 times. Hated it. Worst experience of my life. And I thought I never go and do this stuff again in terms of being a creator because it's not natural.
Right.
Then I got, on this podcast, I did your podcast. I'm seeing the numbers, the actual business opportunity from podcasts. It might not be so sexy to a lot of people, but the podcast game is by far the best one that I've seen in terms of being a creator right now.
It definitely I mentioned Bill Simmons' podcast earlier. I remember reading an article talking about, because he had been at ESPN for years and years and had a brand there, like an in-house brand that was unprofitable, and it was called Grantland, and sort of was fired from ESPN or let go because he couldn't make Grantland profitable. And in an article responding to that, last year or something, he talked about how in the first year of The Ringer, his new project's existence, his podcast alone was making like $8 million.
That's insane. So, okay, let's break it down for people.
Sure.
Logan Paul, he uploads something on YouTube.
Right.
He's getting paid from advertisers or through networks on YouTube.
Sure.
5-10 minute video.
Right.
A podcast creator is getting paid per CPM, per 1,000 listeners.
Sure, yeah.
for an hour.
Well, for
45-minute episodes or
yeah, I would say, most podcasts are in that range of 45 to an hour, but I think Tim Ferriss sometimes has 3-hour interviews.
Amazing.
Joe Rogan can go 5 hours sometimes. And what's different, I think, is that rather than, showing in a YouTube video, right? You watch Logan Paul. I don't think I ever have, praise, but you watch Logan Paul, and before the video plays, there's YouTube's algorithm plays an ad for yogurt or something.
Sure.
The difference with podcast advertising, which I think is really interesting, is the host or the person that the podcast is about, or whose podcast it is reading the ad themselves. So when I'm listening to Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or Mark Maron or these huge podcasters, I'm listening to them talking about the products that they're like,
and a lot of times their personal experiences with it.
Exactly. Like, I hate to go back to Bill Simmons, but again, I was listening to his podcast yesterday, and he's sponsored by Gillette, and he's talking about, he walked through the Gillette factory a couple weeks ago, and the different things that he saw on the wall, and it feels like a much more organic, personal experience.
It's been on my wonder list for like 3 years, so I still haven't done it, and this would be the best plug because I'm telling the story of this brand or company, but It was Urban Escape and Evasion, and it was something I heard on the Tim Ferriss podcast. And my buddy Sammy Kamkar, who was a guest on Tim Ferriss, they were kind of having this back and forth dialogue, and I'm sure there was some collaboration or partnership, but the conversation was so organic, and it was such a neat experience. For international business entrepreneurs, you can go and be a part of these like simulated kidnappings.
It's like SEER school for civilians.
Exactly. They throw you in a van. They have to teach you how to get out of handcuffs. It was just like super cool.
Yeah.
And when you hear a natural storyteller talking about a product or service or company in that way,
totally, and
with a guest, it makes it so much more impactful to me than tagging or hashtag ad.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Agreed. Yeah, it definitely feels like it sort of is like the natural equilibrium between authenticity and commerce.
Yep.
Like when I'm watching like an Instagram influencer and they're posting about Target or whatever, and it's like hashtag ad, it's like, oh, this is just like I live in a fucking dystopian future. And when I'm listening to Mark Maron talk about Squarespace, I'm like, oh yeah, he's just doing his thing, being Mark Maron, and he's doing an ad.
Yep.
And it feels more authentic.
So let's talk about the business for a little bit more. The business of podcasts, I think, is incredibly interesting. And it may be that there's this generation gap. I don't know if millennials are listening to podcasts. You've got better data on this than me.
Sure. They are.
They are.
Certainly more than any market penetration to the millennial demographic is far deeper than any other generation for podcasting. I think based on the data that I've looked at, I think women listen, the percentage of women that are listening is a little higher than the percentage of men. Definitely is the case for our podcast. But yeah, so young people are listening to podcasts much more than older people.
So they're spending any idea of how much time they're spending listening to? Do they do it like a Netflix binge where they're watching or listening to 10 episodes?
Again, I haven't looked at data that specifically refers to it. I can only speak, anecdotally.
Sure.
But my behavior, the behavior of the people that I am close with and that I know, listen to podcasts, it's kind of like in the car, walking the dog.
Right.
I a lot of times I transition from the car to making dinner, and I just like pause the podcast and put it back on when I'm cooking dinner. I think it's one of those things because our phones are so ever present in our lives, and this is a very much more millennial thing than any other generation. I think that it kind of just becomes almost second nature. Like I think that it just becomes part of what we're doing.
Right. This becomes part of the conversation or
exactly.
activity. So who are the top earners that are currently doing podcasts right now?
So obviously, you got to look at the top charts.
Yep.
So Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss,
Ty Lopez, probably.
Sam Harris. Well, I've told you about Patreon before, which I think is a really interesting model, and it's actually how one of the ways that we're monetizing our podcast as well is basically it's sort of like Kickstarter in the sense that you're building community and excitement through the internet. So people on the internet are helping to fund what you're doing.
Right.
But it's an ongoing thing, and it's sort of you create tiered levels of support and tiered levels of basically, people get different stuff based on how they're supporting you.
So what's the incentive for the fan or user?
There's a couple different ways that Patreon does it. For some people, only supporters through Patreon get access to the content.
Got it.
So, I can create a locked piece of content that only my supporters get access to.
Makes sense. That's how you restrict it.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that's one way. Other ways are, for instance, some of the incentives that we have for our podcast are you get a free t-shirt. At a higher level, you can basically send us an issue that you're passionate about, and we will talk about it on the show and shout you out on the show. Yep. So it's basically a way for people different ways for people to feel more involved, feel more kind of like stakeholders in the community that you're building. And for us specifically, just because we started our podcast around an idea, around a message. It was really valuable to be able to try and build community around that message of like, Millennials don't suck. We are really fucking sick. We're doing awesome shit. Let's all, support each other. We kind of built it specifically around millennial political activism, especially in the lead up to the midterms.
And I want to get on that platform for sure. But for me, I think what the most exciting thing was you're promoting your message, doing it in a natural storytelling way. The minimal startup costs involved with the podcast, I think were so exciting to me. I mean, so our company went through a merger. We merged with two companies. One I started, one I was a partner in the other. We consolidated our assets. And I really elected to not be the CEO anymore because I wanted to do more marketing, this in-house influencer role that I created.
Right.
But with that, there's more bureaucracy like any company. There's a board. And the board, elects everybody from the CEO to the CRO, which is me, and every division head, which is me in the marketing side, has a budget.
Right.
So I have my budget to work with. I was like, okay, I was a little worried, like, damn it, the podcasting is gonna burn into my 2018, and I showed it to everyone. They were shocked.
Yeah.
And I think you see all this expensive equipment.
Totally.
And I've been involved in content for so long, which. Finally, I found this medium where it's like, holy crap, I can combine video, podcast, and hopefully have real tangible ROI 100%. In maybe 2 months.
I mean, it's not unreasonable. I think that, one of the keys that we had that were really helpful for us in building an audience quickly, and we've talked about this before, but we had a little bit of press at the start.
Yep.
We got a lot of influencer help at the beginning to sort of, kickstart our growth. And then once we got like on certain playlists in iTunes, that helped us grow much quicker. And it sort of became like like the new and noteworthy playlist.
Sure.
Or the new and noteworthy list. So basically people who are on the iTunes homepage, they go to the podcast and like, oh, what's new? And it's like at the top of the page.
Yep.
And then once you're there, it's basically... you can get on the top 100 lists, for podcasts, and that allows you, gives you tremendous amount of leverage in ad buying and all kinds of stuff.
And that's, so on the first part is how do you get juice?
Sure.
The same way video impressions is collaborators.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
are piggybacking off each other's audience.
Yep.
If you don't have an audience, then you get somebody with a bigger audience with the hope of them promoting it.
Yep.
Which is great.
Yeah.
So you're getting a lot of the free exposure. The podcast is an ego stroke for any talent because it's free PR. They've got nothing to lose. And frankly, I would say podcasts are way more fun than any other interview. I don't do too much traditional PR anymore for a lot of the reasons that, depending on which political view they swing, but also the type of publication, I feel like I've been set up for hit pieces so much the past year that unless I really know the angle, I just don't even really talk PR anymore. And crypto. So those are two things that I've stopped entirely. Whereas podcasts, I can control the conversation more because I'm involved in it. I'm not, I'm not getting tweaked on behind the scenes.
Your voice can't be, manipulated into saying something specific or something that you didn't mean to say. I think that's one of the revelations of this, is that it has it allows the listener and the person who's speaking, you or I feel like whatever I'm saying is exactly how I'm going to be interpreted, right?
Exactly.
Because we're just talking. We're just two dudes having a conversation that happens to be recorded. That's how I see podcasting. Is like, this is an experience, a chance to be as authentic of an experience of this person as possible. And so when I actually do interviews, I try and go in relatively blind.
Right.
Because, obviously I know a little bit about them.
Sure.
But I try and maintain that curiosity. I want to be curious about you so that that's real when I'm talking to you. Like when you and I talked for the first time. Like we spoke briefly, but I really wanted to be curious about your life and about who you are and your, the choices that you've made professionally, personally, etc. That I think this medium has a chance to show that, when you're reading an article about someone, when you're listening to a 4-minute radio interview, when you're watching, a 45-second clip of somebody on Instagram or something, you don't get that experience of that person. And to me, I'm through podcasts is some of the only times that I've actually gone out of my way to pay for things that were,
See, that's incredible. I think that's incredible. So contextual marketing at its finest. It's working. Learning. I think the knowledge bombs from podcasting is going to be way more effective than some YouTube infomercial.
Totally.
So growth hacking a podcast, minimal cost, a few $1,000s in startup fees,
if that.
Marketing page, landing page.
Yeah.
You need to have access to good people and collaborators.
That I would say that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
is your network.
Yep.
And it's funny, like as sort of the switch got flipped after about a year, I don't even know how long really, but to where I didn't really have to seek guests out anymore. People would just email or contact me through the website or whatever. But it becomes interesting how you begin to realize how valuable really good, professional, honest people are. Right. And how much rarer they are than you thought in terms of...
Bold statement, especially coming from a fellow Angelino.
No, but it's... Yeah, I mean, it's true.
I hear you.
That your network is so important. The people that you choose to have on this thing are so important in that you don't want bullshitters who are just going to come on and like talk out of the side of their mouths, or just going to not that every single interview of every person that I've done has been a person that I would 100% hang out with in real life.
Sure.
But for the most part, they are. And to me, that's the benchmark. I want to listen to somebody who's like, yeah, that's a cool person.
No, and I think it's such a great way, I don't know, call it an icebreaker, call it a way of networking. I don't call myself master guru of anything. I don't believe in those bullshit things, but I'm very good at networking. And I'm very good at selling, and I can do it in any environment. Drunk on an airplane, at a wedding, in a third world country. It's just, I find ways to meet interesting people and develop relationships all over the world. And using the podcast tool for me has been a really, really interesting one, because you're not going to get turned down a lot if you are really good at selling it. So it's allowed me to be a lot more efficient with my time with respect to networking.
Right.
Because I'd say for the past few years, especially as I started to build, online presence, personal brand, I started to get a little bit, weird with going and networking in public because I didn't see the ROI. I don't want to go to CES. I don't want to be around 10,000 marketers or technology people. Like, I'm just over that.
You don't want to go to like a brand fest.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to I've been to the Collision Conf. I have no interest in going back. But now I have a clear purpose and a goal.
Right.
So if I'm looking to get somebody on my show and I could meet them in 10 minutes, swap details and digits, have them on my podcast, develop a relationship naturally, that is way more cooler and exciting to me.
It checks like 4 boxes instead of 1.
Exactly.
Because you're getting a piece of content out of it. You're getting a potential relationship out of it. You're getting a person who has positive feelings towards you because you've asked them about how cool they are for the last hour.
Yep.
And you're getting access. They're sharing this interview with their network.
Yep.
So people who get to listen to you who are in their network that you don't even know exist might hear about you and be like, oh, whoa, that guy's really cool. I want to have access to him.
So that segues into how to get discovered. You get the collaborators, you get the influencers. They share it. It goes and they download it through iTunes.
Through iTunes. I mean, at this point, people listen to podcasts on probably 25 different platforms.
Okay.
And that points to sort of...
But how do you get featured? News and noteworthy. That's what everybody wants to be.
Honestly, I still don't really know how it happened for
Nobody
us.
knows,
like
right? Apple's got that black box.
I mean, that was sort of what I was potentially segueing into, is that it's 2018 and people think that this is like all figured out.
Right.
But it's like 1994 internet. Like, this is the Wild West still. People still don't have... There is no accurate way of knowing how many downloads a podcast gets still.
Right.
Apple apparently can account for like 70% of them.
Now, I feel like it would be safe to assume that traffic that goes to your podcast on SoundCloud would not reward you in iTunes.
Well, so for me, I host my podcast on SoundCloud.
Okay.
So I send the RSS feed from SoundCloud to iTunes.
Okay.
So I think at least some of the listens that I'm getting in iTunes
Because of the RSS.
because of the theoretically that's how it should work.
Yeah.
Right. Is based on the RSS. All of the aggregate listens from basically wherever you send your RSS feed. All of the aggregate listens from all of those different locations will be sent back to the originator of that feed.
Yep.
But based on everything I've read, it just and I'm not technically savvy enough to know kind of the nuts and bolts of it, but there still is not like because Apple's a black box, because there isn't an entity, because ad companies that have proprietary technology aren't sharing it.
Right.
Like for instance, Midroll is like one of the biggest podcast ad companies, and apparently they have like proprietary software that's able to track all kinds of user behavior with podcasts, including downloads, like pretty accurately. But they don't share that with people.
Now, iTunes does not show you downloads for podcasts?
They do. However, it's just kind of the authorities out there say that it is not fully accurate or fully representative.
Well, because it's showing a download through iTunes, but not necessarily a listen through an RSS feed like a SoundCloud.
Correct. Like a SoundCloud, like a Spotify, like a Stitcher, like a Breaker, like an Echo. You get the idea.
Yep.
There's so many.
So, I mean, that begs the question, should you want to put the focus on only promoting the episode via iTunes?
See, where I'm at is I think I'm a shotgun approach type of guy.
Okay.
The way that I primarily promote the episode itself is actually by embedding a SoundCloud link on a page on our website and linking to the page.
Okay.
So basically, it directs people to our website first and foremost, so that not only are they and the SoundCloud link plays automatically once they land on the page.
Right.
So they click the link, the podcast immediately starts playing. So that barrier to them actually having to click something to make it start playing is gone. They just have to click on the link.
Right.
But when I also tweet out links to to our iTunes.
So like anything in product design, in tech and social media, it's all about user experience. Make it as simple as possible for the user to listen.
Exactly.
And forget about where you're driving traffic for now.
And again, it all comes back, like my philosophy on all of this has been, what would I do? Like I listen to a shitload of podcasts. So who would I want to listen to? How would I want to listen to a podcast? You know, at night I listen through Stitcher because they have like a sleep timer. So if I want to fall asleep to a podcast, I can put on like, you know, turn off in 30 minutes.
Interesting.
So I put my podcast on Stitcher. Like, because iTunes or the podcast app doesn't have that option.
Yeah.
So I want to give people as many opportunities to experience, you know, whatever I'm trying to do as possible.
I think that's so cool and different than how traditional social media engagement works today, where it's a race for traffic to a single platform.
Right.
Whether it's real traffic or fake traffic, it doesn't really matter.
No.
It's let's push and pump as much traffic to our YouTube, to our Instagram, with the goal of doing, we don't know exactly,
XYZ.
more brand money, more engagement, blah, blah, blah. But not really caring about the user.
No.
Not caring about the user at all. And with podcasts or podcast creators, it's truly, how do we make this most accessible way to make sure our listeners are tuning in through any other app or platform?
Well, I think, I mean, I can't say this, but again, just personally, like, I wouldn't want to listen to a shitty fake. Like, I think it's much harder to be inauthentic when you're talking for an hour or an hour and a half. Like, I think in a 10-second Instagram video or whatever, you can sort of just like, oh, look how sick my life is.
Well, look at Little Tay.
I don't know who that is.
Come on.
Dude, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay, so Little Tay is...
I'm not good at social media.
So we were first brought an opportunity to work... I call them the meme-fluencers.
Okay.
Meme-fluencers are like the Catch Me Outside girl.
Oh, yeah, right.
So their team, their business team, called us to do an app for them.
There's a whole team.
There's a team. They called us to do an app, and I said no.
Okay.
We don't take on these kind of projects. I don't support that, and I'm not contributing to society in this kind of way.
Great.
Another app developer worked with them, so someone else did the job.
They've got a Catch Me Outside app.
And what I started to see was this trend of people or content starting out as a meme and then turning into influencers. So that was a Catch Me Outside girl. It happened recently with this girl a 9-year-old who rivals with the Catch Me Outside girl called Little Tay.
Okay.
And she's got 2.5 million followers on Instagram. She's 9 years old. She hangs out with rappers. She drives Rolls-Royce Phantoms like in the garage. She goes to Mastro's with her pink dog. I mean, this is the craziest shit you've ever seen.
It's like that kid in Dubai or whatever who has like every famous person ever to his like zoo. Have you seen this?
No.
Oh, I'll show you.
I want to see that one. So she, she's been clout chasing, and it turns out this 9-year-old is secretly being, of course, master puppeteered by her brother, who's a failed YouTube influencer, and her mother, who was borrowing the Ferraris and the cars from her boss at a real estate development company.
Whoa.
Got fired. So now, they're like living the Hollywood dream and faking it.
If she has 3 million followers, then they're chilling.
Well, yeah, I feel like that's another big misconception with the influencer creators, where people think they're like balling, and we've worked with plenty that are not balling, and they don't know how to manage cash flow that well either. So she gets leaked this video gets leaked on the web of her brother and mom coaching her, and it's really, really sad. It's really, really depressing and awful. Sad. Where we've come in society, but also content that creators are creating, with collaborators wanting to work with her. Now, some of them are saying, oh, well, we can take her fame and use it for good and promote it to our charity and on our animal shelter. That's great. If that actually works, God bless, love it.
Yeah.
But I believe that's bullshit. Other people are enabling it like a drug addiction, and they're saying, it's no different in any marketing game. If you got to collaborate with people who've got high traffic, high followers in order to build your audience, build your following. So the entire community of influencers are now enabling her behavior and, collaborating with this 9-year-old who should be in school, but is instead making rap music videos. It's all about incentives. Mm-hmm. And I love studying incentives.
Yeah.
It's my favorite thing to do.
Phenomenal.
Super freaking nerdy, but it's important. It's why we had a financial crisis. It's how you get people to do what you want in sales and business. Incentives are at the core of everything.
It's why our political system is the way it is.
Yes. So let's talk about that.
Sure. So, we were talking about this Lil Tay girl,
Yep.
right? And how sort of her parent or her mom and her brother have coached her into this sort of fake Instagram lifestyle because they're incentivized to do so.
Right.
And what I think is really interesting about the podcasting space is that because barrier to entry is so low, anybody can do this. The quality has to be like the quality of the conversation, the quality of the people that you're talking to, the quality of the production. It has to be really good.
Yeah.
Because the audience, there's only a finite, there's only 24 hours in a day. There's only 2 hours in a day that people might listen, that true podcast audience members might spend listening to podcasts. So how are they going to listen to those? How are they going to spend that time? So, content creators in the podcast space are incentivized to create really fucking good shit.
You have to step up your game, and I feel like the part of your brain that is processing data and information from a podcast and a passive video like Little Tays on Instagram is totally different. You could both be doing them on the toilet. I'm not saying that, but you're processing the information in a totally different manner.
100%. It's when I'm looking at, I don't know about you, but when I'm looking at Instagram, I do not feel intellectually challenged or stimulated in any type of way. It's almost like I need to escape this reality for 5 minutes or whatever. But when I'm listening to a podcast, I'm looking to better myself first and foremost. Like I'm looking to learn something. I'm looking to gain an understanding about a person, about an idea, about a theory, or whatever it might be. But first and foremost, I'm looking to learn.
Yep.
And I think that's, if you look at the most popular podcasts, right? Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History, Mark Maron, Tim Ferriss, one of my new favorites is, have you watched that Queer Eye show on Netflix?
No.
So one of the guys on there, this guy Jonathan Van Ness, has a podcast. It's fucking great because these people are really smart and they're really intelligent and they ask really good questions and they bring the best out of the guests that they have on. It's like we're creating a culture. Say what you will about Howard Stern, the dude's a fucking genius.
Yeah, he was an OG influencer of podcasts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If Howard Stern was coming up today, he would have a podcast.
Yeah.
And he's amazing at getting people to be vulnerable and getting to have authentic, real conversations. That's why he got paid $500 million to have a radio show.
Yep. No, and that's for a lot of those reasons. It's why I dumped my Instagram, and I still have it because I needed to promote Facebook ads. So that's the only reason. LinkedIn started throttling and shadow banning and shadow blocking a lot of my content for whatever reason, along with other creators. So I've been figuring out where do I kind of strike next in terms of making a splash. And I think the things for me are, I'm never going to replace my day-to-day income with a hobby of sorts that is me creating content. It's more of supplemental income. Could there be a little passive? Great. But lead generation is the biggest.
Totally.
Can it bring in leads? And in our industry, selling services, we will do whatever it takes to get leads for cheap cost and quality leads. So building microsites, app calculators, buying high traffic blogs, spending money on Facebook retargeting, writing viral content on Quora, LinkedIn, anything. And we're one of the few companies, I would say, in our space that have taken to this this style or this technique of building a team of quote unquote influencers in our business, where if you are a salesperson, the expectation of you is to write and create content now. If you can't write content, we're going to give you an editor. But you have to you have to be vulnerable on the page, on LinkedIn, etc. Right. And we started working with this advisor in Uruguay, badass entrepreneur. He started all the McDonald's in Uruguay, sold all the chains to McDonald's Corporation, and then took a board seat in McDonald's Latin America. So very more traditional, high-performance CEO type. First met me, and he told me, he goes, Ben, when I first met you and then saw the stuff you were doing, I thought this guy's like an egocentric maniac.
Right.
And then now I've gotten to know you over the course of a half a year, see the strategies you're doing with the company, and you need to be doing more of this shit. Like, make me an influencer. I want to be an influencer. Like, keep doing this. Make everybody an influencer. Make influencers in Uruguay. Make influencers in the U.S. This is real. It brings in business, high-quality business. It converts. It saves anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 a month on Facebook or Google AdWord costs for us.
That's amazing.
So it's really cool to start seeing the baby boomer generations, even older, go, wow. I don't know if I'm savvy enough or I necessarily have the right tools or practice, but I want to support this stuff. And I want to push as many young people, creators as possible to figure out how to do this, expand their reach, build an influencer profile.
100%. I'll take it even further. I think that, people of older generations are seeing the power with this in their own lives. And for, I'm starting to produce podcasts for people in the baby boomer generation who are looking for the same type of lead generation.
Yep.
People in the consulting space, that sort of thing. People who see, this is how to basically personally, I'm so uncomfortable in the spotlight. I'm so uncomfortable, in front of people.
Sure.
But which is why a podcast is awesome because you don't have to be on camera except right now. But the value in developing your personal brand in 2018 and developing a brand that people associate with you professionally is just too much. You can't avoid it at this point. It just is a part of.
And I have real data that we've tested. I mean, we've A/B tested different brands. We've built Neon Roots, Rootstrap, my personal brand. The personal brand always wins. Acquisition cost. We've gotten engagement to PR to like 12 cents per engaged post.
Wow.
Whereas a company branded one might be $1. So what marketing are you doing?
Right. That's interesting.
Right now to bring more awareness to the podcast.
So,
or what would you like to be doing?
So it's interesting, you talked about LinkedIn sort of throttling. So when we launched the podcast, Facebook was, the primary, this was 2016. So Facebook was sort of the primary content aggregator. And so we primarily built out the audience through Facebook.
Yep.
And so we got a pretty sizable audience. Our cost per engagement, cost per click, that sort of thing. I was down to like 4 cents or some shit.
Wow.
It was. I got pretty good at it, and obviously Facebook changed their algorithm.
Sure.
So now we didn't talk about this, but the podcast had to take a bit of a hiatus.
Yep.
My co-host had some health issues, so we had all this momentum, and then we sort of took a pause. And so I've been sort of, as I've relaunched it, we've had to figure out, okay, what's the best way to re-engage this audience?
So before the hiatus, you were doing Facebook ads?
Facebook ads, yeah.
Okay. And what would you say those were loyal subscribers?
No, so what I was doing was basically Facebook ads to gain awareness of who we were.
Got it.
Because I felt like once people got this exists, because specifically just because our name was sort of so like, oh, what is that?
Right.
Like once people heard it, they would explore. And that was what happened. I drove traffic to our page to get people to like the page, to be able to, get shown content from our page. And I knew that once we could get them there, we'd be able to get them as fans. And that's absolutely what happened. It's just once Facebook changed the algorithm, I'm sure you know as well that now it's like, unless you paid to show your own audience your posts, if I post something on our Facebook page without boosting it, we have however many thousands of people that are our followers, it'll get shown to like 80 people.
Right.
And so that,
it's so messed up. I know. It's insane. I mean, shouldn't it be shown to
the people who've chosen?
Who opted in to like it.
One would think, but so I think it's still what I've seen, and sort of in the last 6 months or so, I've gotten much more into Twitter than I previously had, because it feels like all of the important conversations that are happening in our culture are happening on Twitter. Like I'm obviously, and I've talked about this on our podcast a lot, but we've had a ton of politically sort of leaning people on the past 20 or so episodes, just because for the millennial generation, this really is kind of a do or die moment politically in November, especially, we really suck if we don't vote.
Yep.
We do. And so like the thesis of our podcast is at stake.
Yep.
And so we've pushed a tremendous amount of energy into branding and forming our conversation around kind of the political agenda. So a lot of the stuff that we've done, the partnerships we've done, have been politically themed.
Yeah, no, I get that. I would say Twitter has really just been a channel for me in terms of syndicating content. I've never super got into it, although I do know a lot of good writers, creators, inventors, entrepreneurs. They're using that as their primary channel to communicate.
Yeah.
I would say it's all the other bad shit that kind of spoiled it for me.
The Trumps of the world.
The Trumps, the cryptos, for the over amount of just crazy noise.
Yeah.
And the double standard with how we allow certain things to happen, yet we still haven't really impeached our president. Not to get all political, but Roseanne is a big asshole, and I'm very glad that her show got canceled.
Totally.
But I mean, that was pretty damn quick for a studio to respond to, and they're going to get a massive ROI from this PR stunt. They're going to look really good.
No, and I mean, if you actually look at the ratings numbers behind the decision, Roseanne had a huge first couple of weeks and then plummeted. So the bit, like, it wasn't even I don't think it was even a difficult business decision.
No, and it's something that you wonder. Only the masses of the universe and executives who are part of those types of meetings and decisions secretly think like, wow, this is a blessing in disguise. Thank God this happened and we get to cut this loose. Because they don't have to, they could terminate without cause.
Right.
And they don't have to explain themselves. And they could just pull the plug on something.
Yep. And it doesn't have to be, like, if they had canceled Roseanne without something like this
there's no way it would
because half the country would be pissed the fuck off. But it's like, oh wait, she actually said terrible things. Like, you have to be really fucked up to not think that she deserves to be fired.
That for me, it's how do we fix that problem? Because yet we are penalizing people for whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Being a part of freedom of speech and taking too much Ambien and saying dumb shit and being a racist and getting fired. Great, that should happen. Yet we have the Trumps, but also the mini Trumps of the world who are learning this lesson in politics and are learning the playbook to growth hacking presidencies, who always scare me far more than Donald Trump. It's fuck Donald Trump. It's the guy in Venezuela. It's the guy in Colombia. It's the guy in Mexico who's watching. He's like, wow, I could be president one day. And that's the crazy thing. Growing up, I was always like, no, I'm not interested in politics. I don't have the, I'm too rough around the edges for politics.
Look at Zuckerberg.
Now it's like, there you go. Yeah.
Fucking Zuckerberg, like, before the whole Facebook thing happened, that guy was definitely going to run for president. Like, he had polling. He was doing like a whistle stop tour across the country. He had like a slogan. He was quoted as saying, Facebook can make someone president. Like, all this shit. That dude was running for president.
Wow.
And
I have not heard that one. No, I mean, why not?
Right?
Why not? I mean, he he certainly made the politicians look pretty damn stupid.
So what's interesting to me, kind of going back to this idea about like why is podcasting, so interesting in 2018, is like as our conversations become more and more bite-sized.
Yes.
As we a Twitter exchange happens in characters, not words,
right.
not minutes. This is an opportunity to have a more full-bodied conversation.
Yes.
You and I, we can have a discourse. We can have a give and take. Hope obviously sometimes aggregators take little bits and pieces of an interview and extrapolate it and
sure.
make it fucked up. But for the most part, if somebody's listening to a podcast, if I'd listen to somebody talk for an hour or two, I can generally tell what type of person they are.
Absolutely.
Like you can only fake it for so long.
We need that full context right now.
Yeah.
We really do.
Yeah.
The bite size, the character limit, it's not working.
No.
We're only getting a part of the message. And a good example is, let's let our president do more of like Good Morning Americas, where he's not restricted to character count.
That was
amazing.
Very revealing.
That was incredible.
Yeah.
So, give him more opportunities like that, and don't limit or restrict him to time-boxed meetings or rallies.
Yep.
Let him fucking go crazy for 3 hours.
Still hasn't given a press conference in like 460 days or something.
So I'm all about it.
Awesome, man.
Growth hacking podcast, building a podcast for personal business. I recommend it. I eat my own dog food. I'm doing it. You're helping me produce this thing.
Yeah, dude.
So let's go make a bunch more podcast history.
I think if you want to start a podcast, get a microphone, record yourself talking, find some friends to talk to, do it.
Landing page, small budget of Facebook ads, and you're a creator.
Maybe not Facebook ads now. Whatever the equivalent would be in 2018.
There you go.
Cheers.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, brother.
This is awesome.